my first session, which was English Exams Explained. But this afternoon, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about actually what's involved. The first one was more about how to choose which exam to do, and this one is going to be based on before I started doing this job, I ran an IELTS office, so I was an IELTS exam administrator. So I heard everything at the cold face, so to speak, and coupling that with feedback from my students, past and present, over the last 6 years, I'm hoping I can give you some more insight. So really this session will be aimed to give you more insight into what you need to focus on, and for people who maybe not managed to be successful first time around, what they need to do, to achieve their target scores. So as we were talking about this morning, both exams are testing listening, reading, writing, and speaking. In Pearson's, they're called communicative skills, and in IELTS, that's the only mark you get. I don't want to go too much into the enabling skills in the Pearson's, but that's something, if you've got any questions, you can email me, and I'm happy to get back to you about that. So because time's pressing, and I know that we're a wee bit behind schedule, I'm going to crack on. As I've said before, any questions, make a note and email me, and I'll get back to you next week. So first of all, we're going to start with listening. Now, quite a complicated slide, but I'm trying to put as much information into it as I could for you. So you'll see that along the top, I've divided it into what I perceive to be the problem, what a strategy is that you can use to help get around it, and just a general tip. So there's 2 for IELTS, 2 for Pearson's. As we discussed this morning, basically I'm looking at this as IELTS being general IELTS, that is everyday language, and Pearson being academic language. That's how I've decided it. So IELTS is a skills-based exam, therefore the listening is it's a literal exam. So the biggest problem people have in IELTS listening, other than, obviously they have to practice, you don't just go in the exam because you only hear it once, is that you'll lose marks if you don't spell the word correctly. So if you don't spell the word correctly, or the punctuation's wrong, you don't put a capital letter because it's somebody's name, or you do put a capital letter because it's not somebody's name, then you'll lose a mark. However, on the capital letter issue, you are allowed to write in IELTS in block capitals through everything. So you can write your listening and reading answers in block capitals, you can write your essays, you can write everything in block capitals. So sometimes that's a way around this issue if you think that your spelling, as many people do, might let them down. Because you only hear it once, I would say to you, don't stop, because the minute you stop, you lose the track and you could end up losing 2 or 3 marks, because actually you have time at the beginning when you can start to analyze the question, see what's being asked. And in listening only, you get 10 minutes to transfer your answers so that you can make notes on your question paper and then transfer them. And sometimes you'll remember, or if not, you'll guess, because there's no negative marking. So you just guess, better to put something than nothing. Pearson's, however, the listening is trickier. It's the biggest part of the exam because it's designed as a listening and note-taking exam. It's not what they call a skills-based exam. And therefore, you need to understand what's being tested. You need to understand the scoring system, which is all on the Pearson's website. It's all on the Pearson's website. And also be aware that in IELTS, because it's a skills-based exam, what you hear is what you're going to write down. But in Pearson's, they're also testing vocabulary, spelling, grammar, everything. So you need to improve your accuracy of grammar and spelling. Pearson marks spelling very harshly. If you make a lot of mistakes, you'll probably do as well as somebody who makes 2, because if you make 2 or more mistakes, you get nothing for spelling. So watch out for typos too. That would be classed as a is a spelling mistake in Pearson's. So listening, in summary, skills-based in IELTS, what you hear, you will hear the answer and you write it down, make sure you spell it properly. In Pearson's, more complicated, 8 sections, a lot more grammar, vocabulary and spelling. And of course, it's academic. So you need to expose your brain, because you've got all these words in your head, to academic vocabulary and what it means in the words, because you know the words, you just don't use them in everyday life. So that's the very quick run through of listening. For reading, which because Pearson's is a listening and note-taking exam, the reading is much lighter. It's the smallest part of the exam. I'm going to start with that. It's academic. So again, it's really important to, you can buy academic IELTS books for vocabulary, which work for Pearson's too. You can read science reports, tech reports, environmental reports, anything. It's just about making the words more familiar to you. So having a better understanding of what the text is, because in Pearson's it's all drop-down menu. There's no, you don't have to write your answer in, you just have to choose the right option. However, there isn't a negative marking. So if you make a mistake, you lose a mark. They deduct one. It's not that you don't get. In IELTS, if you make a mistake, you get 0. In Pearson's, in some sections, if you make a mistake, you will get -1, -2, whatever. In IELTS reading exam, again, the time management is the issue, because in IELTS, because it's a skills-based exam, each exam has what they call the same weighting. So it has 40 questions. The listening has 40 questions and the reading has 40 questions. But 40 questions to answer in an hour in an IELTS exam needs practice, because it's strategy. And you don't get any extra time. You don't get any extra time to transfer your answers onto your sheet as you do in the listening. So you need to make sure that as you go through, you're transferring your answers onto the marking sheet, which is handed in, because you will not get any extra time at the end. The general rule of thumb for all IELTS papers is that the questions are easier at the beginning than the end. So don't fall into the trap of spending too long on section 1, the easiest part, because you need that time for section 3. Section 3 is the most difficult part. So you need to be not racing into that with the clock ticking down to the hour, because that's giving yourself an even bigger challenge. The range of question types is simply the same in reading and listening in IELTS. And again, you just need to study it and understand what they are and which ones are easier for you. Everybody has questions which are easier for them than other ones. And that's just really coming from, there's lots of books of past papers or free practice tests to try them and not just look at the score, but look at which type of question that you are tending to lose marks in and focus on that one. So reading in IELTS is generally, well, it's not generally, it's more difficult than the Pearson's, just because there's more to it. I'm going to hopefully touch on dyslexia at the end, if I've got time, because obviously if you're dyslexic, then the reading paper can present a problem, but I'll talk about that briefly at the end. So then we come to writing, which, as I said this morning, is this very similar in both exams. So don't think that by transferring from Pearson's to IELTS to Pearson's, then it's going to be easier for your essay, because it's not, because it's very similar. So let's start with IELTS. The minimum word count is 150 for your letter, 250 for your essay. Now, this is the only place in IELTS that you're negatively marked. So that if you write 149 words, you will lose a mark. If you write 129 words, you will lose 2 marks in that section. The marking for the writing is very complicated. It's a 4-component system, but it's absolutely essential that you write enough. And you can do that in your preparation by visualizing what 170 words, what 270 words looks like, either on a Word document if you're doing a computer IELTS, or on a piece of A4 lined paper, because when you get to the exam, you don't want to be counting words. You want to look at it and know that it's over the minimum. So that's what I would recommend you do to get around that little one. Also, because IELTS is a skills-based exam, everything is formulaic. There's a job, a function, a point to everything. So this is what you need to be analysing when you're getting ready. Is it a letter of complaint? Is it a letter of an apology? Is it an agree or disagree essay? Is it a pros and cons essay? And if you understand, it's a functional language test. So doing the job that is asked for boosts your scores enormously because you're giving them what they want. And one way to do that is to study sample writing letters and essays. There's masses available on the website for free. Study them, have a look at the question, have a think about what it actually is, and then look at the sample and see how it's been answered and deconstruct it and say, well, how would I have done it? You can use exactly the same technique for your Pearson essays because they're similar, they're academic, so the questions are a little bit trickier maybe. But basically all essays have to be structured, joined together, and reasonably well written. The one point about an academic essay is that it shouldn't be too chatty, because academic vocabulary is, by the nature of it, dry, dull, and boring. It's quite simple. So in an academic essay, you wouldn't use I. You want to make it objective rather than subjective. So in my trade, in my country, in general, but make everything objective rather than subjective. You can add examples. You should add examples, because if you get into the habit of adding an example of what you're saying, then that's automatically going to add 20 more words. So that's going to save you filling up the word count with waffle, which just loses you marks. And the other thing about academic vocabulary is that don't just put big words in, because if you just throw big words in because you think they sound good, it doesn't hang together and you won't get marks. So these are the things to think about when writing an academic essay. Pearson's task 1, I talked about this morning. I think it's the most difficult part of the exam. You have to summarise large chunks of text, because that's how the exam's designed, listening and note-taking. And it's all down to grammar. The biggest problem people have, and the biggest fault I see coming across my desk, is commas. People just comma, 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 comma. Take the comma out and put a word in, and, but, so, when, who, what. That means that you will actually write one sentence instead of 2 or 3. And before you start, identify the main points. Have an idea of what you're joining together. If you've got dates, make a timeline. If you've got places, try and link them all together. And then finally, we come to speaking. Speaking in IELTS is undoubtedly easier than speaking in Pearson for native English speakers. Well, as long as you speak. Biggest problem in IELTS is that people don't speak enough. They don't give the examiners enough words to mark. And that's the only problem, because otherwise it is very much a less than 15-minute interview, for want of a better word, with a person, marked by a person. Pearson speaking is marked by algorithms, which, to be honest, I have absolutely no idea how a computer can mark speaking, but they do. And it is testing, it's basically testing, could you go to a tutorial and present your ideas in a tutorial? So it's testing vocabulary and grammar and all the things that are not in speaking. But, you know, the jury's out on that. That's just my opinion. And, you know, all I would say is if you're in a Pearson speaking exam and somebody's shouting loudly behind you, shout louder, because for sure you don't want to be distracted and you want the computer to hear what you're saying. So, you know, that's something that is, you need to practice more strategies, and you need to practice Pearson speaking more than you do for IELTS. So strategy for success, much the same as I said this morning. Start your planning, start well in advance, find time, make time, find a place, improve overall accuracy of grammar and spelling, especially if you're doing Pearson's, use exam practice and material. Rather, I hear a lot of people saying, I've been on YouTube, I've been on YouTube, I've been on YouTube. Perfect, great. But do not just watch online videos, because you've got to be doing, you've got to practice, because it's an exam situation, it's a competitive situation, and there's only one way to replicate it. So if you are dyslexic, it doesn't mean to say you can't get marks from English exams. And IELTS it's if you have documentation which says you've got help at school or you've been tested, you can get extra time. This is very valuable, because not only do you get extra time, you're in a room of your own, and you get it's quieter, it's more peaceful, and there's less pressure. You apply for that to your exam centre, you would phone your exam centre. Pearson's is a bit hit or miss. Some centres give people extra time, some people, actually in Pearson's you don't get extra time because it's delivered by a computer. Also, you don't get extra time in the computer-delivered IELTS. If you want extra time because of dyslexia, you would need to do a paper-based IELTS exam. Pearson's is a bit hit or miss, but it's like everything in life. If you don't ask, you don't get. So if you have a history of dyslexia and if you had help at school, then I would recommend you get in contact with the exam centre and see what they say. So I'm sorry, folks, it's a bit of a, well, it's not a bit of, it's definitely a big rush through everything, but I hope I've given you something to think about. If you've got any questions about anything, please email me. This is my email address, and I will get back to you next week. And for anybody out there that I have taught, hello, how are you? Not actually my fittest today, but I'll be better soon. For those of you that I haven't met, have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining in with us. Back to you.